Today, I'm joined by Maria Merloni, a psychotherapist, sex and relationship coach, and sacred spot massage practitioner who spent decades helping people come home to their own desire. With a master's degree in social work and a background in clinical practice, she now blends therapy, tantra, somatic healing, and straight talking coaching to support singles and couples, including queer, kinky, non-monogamous, and other sexual minorities, in creating relationships that feel honest, erotic, and deeply alive. Maria runs programs like the Lust Art, co-hosts cuddle parties in a temple of tenderness, and is, as she puts it, as interested in your nervous system and your self-worth as she is in your orgasms. So, how someone raised in a conventional world ends up as a priestess of pleasure, let's hopefully find out. So thank you so much for joining me. You're very kind to give me your time.
You're very welcome.
If you could rewind a little bit, just perhaps to your sort of formative years, what kind of girl was Maria then? What did your early experience teach you about bodies, touch, and being a good girl, I guess?
Well, it's very interesting because I was raised in a not strict, but like a heavy emphasis on Catholicism type of environment.
Mhm.
Uh, but at the same time as that was true, and honestly, my parents didn't even mention sex, right? Like it was so taboo, we pretended it didn't exist. At the same time, my parents also were not afraid of nudity, and they were able to separate nudity and sexuality. So it was common to see someone, walking around after a shower, whatever,
Mhm.
like partially dressed or undressed, and nobody really thought anything of it in our family, for which I'm very grateful, because I think in a lot of families it's not like that at all. And then there's all this shame about the body as well as the usual
Yeah.
stuff, right? A lot of the religious stuff that gets in there. But certainly I knew the message was very clear, which was, you must go to uh, church once a week. You must go to your CCD classes, which are like your religious education classes. And in those classes, the message was, don't have sex before you get married because it's a sin and you'll go to hell, right? So
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so even back then, I would have considered myself to be Catholic, and I believed a lot of what was said. But even at the same time, I remember being probably like, a young teenager and thinking, there's something a little suspicious about this entire Bible story, that mostly there's only men in it, and the two women that are mostly featured are either a virgin who had a baby or a prostitute. There's something a little odd about this whole thing. And so I don't really myself, I don't believe in any particular religion. I would say I'm very spiritual,
Mhm.
but not religious, because I believe that religions have been, ways to try to control people, even though, yeah, do I believe that sometimes, like, we human beings have divine guidance? Absolutely. Do I believe that some of the stuff that's said in the Bible really happened? Yeah, I think I could believe that. Was there a person named Jesus Christ? I would say, yeah, that has been proven. But I really don't believe all the how religion has made many world religions have made sex out to be bad and evil. So I definitely diverged from what I was taught as a kid.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Whenever I hear the words organized religion, I always know what I'm going to get. I think exactly as you said. I think there's such a powerful sense of spirituality in the world at the moment. I don't think it needs to be confined by the boundaries of what one religion over another sort of dictates it would be. So at what point did you feel comfortable in your own body, in your own sort of sexual being?
Hmm. That's a good question. So, from a very young age, I'd already discovered masturbation. I was already masturbating to orgasm when I was probably like 4 or 5 years old, where I was pretty sure my sister on the other side of the room was just, we turned the lights off and she was just sleeping immediately, right? So I was always a very sexual person. So we might say that I always felt comfortable in my own body, even though I did have these parts of me that thought, like, wow, I'm doing something bad, like,
Mm.
this is obviously, I'm not supposed to be doing this, because it was a secret, right? Um, as I became an adult, so when I was in college, my friends and I wanted to go to Bermuda on a trip to Bermuda. And so for spring break, we planned on this. And I was used to working during the summers, having enough money to get myself through, the months of college, but not to have an extra trip. So I needed to get a job, and I got a job as a nude model. So I think I was 18 or 19. And to me, that was no big deal. So I would say I must have been comfortable, right? I think I've always been comfortable with my body because of what I mentioned, right? About my parents not having shame about their own bodies. And so, people thought it was a huge deal on campus. I ended up quitting because strangers would come up to me and say, I can't believe your boyfriend lets you do this. And I would say, wow, if my boyfriend didn't let me do my job, then I guess he wouldn't be my boyfriend, right? Because he doesn't own me or my body. So I feel like, I've always had this strong knowing that there's nothing wrong with any of our bodies, that they are what they are. They don't look perfect. They don't look the way that society has told us that they're supposed to look. And having, later on in my story, I end up becoming an exotic dancer. So that was sort of like the next step after the nude modeling. And I can tell you for sure that there's no such thing as a perfect body, right? Because I've seen, at least for women, and I know for men too, I've seen a lot of women without their clothes on, and there's no such thing, right? We think there's this ideal and that somewhere, someone out there has it, but nobody does.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you said about the people coming up to you and saying, "Gosh, I can't believe your boyfriend lets you do that," and it makes me sad. I've got a 19-year-old daughter, and it makes me sad to think that actually I don't think the patriarchy's evolved very much really since then. I talked to somebody this week, and she makes adult content. She was saying her partner, yeah, sort of. She told her partner, was very open with it. At the beginning, he was fine, and then when his sort of friends found out, he came back and told her she was a whore and she was a slut, and nobody wanted to be with her, and people would be ashamed of her. And you think, my goodness, this feels very sort of 19th century almost. It just doesn't feel like we've moved on.
Yes.
It's a massive question, but why? Why are we still stuck in that sort of repressed view that almost, first of all, a man should allow a woman to do something, and then secondly, that being a stripper, a exotic dancer, new model, adult content creator, OnlyFans person, whatever, why we still demean that as being something that's a very, very negative and
Yeah.
shameful thing?
I think these roots are very deep. And as we've found out in recent research, people have traits and experiences and traumas that get passed down in the genes,
Yeah.
right? I think that now they have traced it back 13 generations. And I
Right.
can tell you that for a fact, we haven't come very far because I just had a similar experience a couple of weeks ago. I was at a party, and my husband and I were getting ready to leave the party, and I said something about how I've been lifting weights because I want to, improve my muscle mass, because that's the big thing now, right?
Yep.
When we're getting older, is you need to have more muscles. So my friend, whose birthday party it was, I was like, flexing, and he said, "Is it okay if I check out your muscles?" So he was like touching my leg muscles and my arms and my butt, and he kept asking my husband if it was okay. And I said, "Don't ask him. It's my body." And he said, "It's he just sort of explained it away, like, "Oh, well, I mean, that's what I'm used to." This is 2026.
Yeah, it's like that old story when you're out to it and somebody says, "Well, does she take sugar?" I said, "What? What can't she answer for herself?" It just, yeah,
Well, yes,
it
exactly,
is.
right.
It is very odd.
Yes, and then I don't know if they do it in the UK, but certainly in America, and I've written about this before. So when you're at a table for dinner, maybe it's a male and a female, and
Hmm.
you order a bottle of wine.
Hmm.
In America, they bring a glass to the man and pour a little bit of wine so he can make sure the wine's okay.
Yeah.
They don't ask the woman.
No, it's funny because I'm teetotal, don't drink alcohol, If we go out for dinner, we'll order, my wife will order a glass of wine or gin and tonic, whatever. I'll order a soft drink, whatever. And when they come and bring them to the table, they'll always put the alcoholic drink in front of me and always give my wife the soft drink. Well,
Yeah.
there's that assumption that, well, but you must drink. It must be your wife that doesn't drink. It's it's a fun one. So when you trained as a clinical social worker, psychotherapist,
Yeah.
what was it that drew you into that path originally? Was it just a desire to connect with people? Because you come across as a very people-oriented person, even in our short conversation. Was that what
Yes.
pulled you to? Okay.
It's interesting because when I chose my major as as a senior in high school, and my
Mhm.
guidance counselor said, what do you think you want to major in college? And so my answer was very surface, but also I think very accurate, which was, well, psychology class is the only thing I really like, so I guess I'll major in psychology. Right? And in retrospect, I knew for a long time that I wanted to be a therapist, and so eventually I got my master's degree in clinical social work.
Mhm.
People say that therapists become therapists to kind of like work out their own issues. And
I've heard
I
that. Yeah.
think that's true, right? I was seeking to understand myself because of some of the experiences, the traumatic experiences that I had as a child, which I believe, we all have to one degree or another. Some people say, well, I've never had any trauma, but trauma can be many things, right? It's not just if you were raped or you were in active combat. Like those are the
Yeah.
things that I think most people think of as trauma, but people are traumatized from bad car accidents. People
Mhm.
are traumatized from any form of abuse, subtle or not, right? And so I think I was trying to work out my own stuff, which I didn't really do through my training, but I did through having years of therapy.
Yeah. I think it's that almost innate internal curiosity, really, isn't it? To sort of understand
Yes.
what happened. Yeah, I would struggle a little bit because I have. I'm sure you've heard this before, but from somebody. But I have no memories before about 8 or 9. Just
Mhm.
my wife literally can remember everything about her childhood when she was little in her first school. And I mean, I say no memories. I'm sure I can remember odds, tiny, maybe 1 or 2 memories, and maybe those memories are driven by photographs I've seen. But yeah, there's no memories of that early life really, and I always wonder what that means. Maybe I just don't wonder enough to go and explore it. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
Well, I mean, yes, I've certainly heard that before, and usually it means that there was some trauma that the mind has chosen to forget.
Yeah, and
But
and then
somehow you've made it to adulthood, and you're functioning, and
yeah,
everything's all
yeah,
right, I think.
yeah. And then, but then what was it then that was a sort of the shift between, sorry, from being a therapist where you were sort of talking to people about everything to being focused primarily on more sort of sexuality, relationships, and that sort of dynamic?
Mhm. So that's always really sex and relationships has always been my main interest. And I think that even other people knew that about me. So people like friends have been asking me sex questions since I was in high school. Right? They would just like, why me? I didn't go around talking about sex like I was an expert on it, but I think that innately I've always had that knowledge about it. Um, and so, when I first became a therapist, and then the reason why I became an exotic dancer was so I could go back to school again to become a life coach.
Hmm.
It was sort of just like I just imagined myself being in this general practice. But when I became an exotic dancer, I had a very different experience than I think probably most dancers do, in that I could see that there were times I was really doing sacred work at the strip club, working with men to help them overcome their shame about the fact that they were even there at
Yeah.
a strip club, right? Like they would come up to the stage, and the common name for someone who, or the common name for the seat that's at the stage is pervert row. Right? So it's right there, this label. I must be a pervert because I'm here at the strip club, and as a heterosexual man or a bisexual man or whatever, I enjoy looking at naked women. of course, there would be nothing more natural than that, right? But it's called pervert row. And, I think that the big thing I learned there at the club was that really the thing that men were coming there for was connection. It wasn't really anything to do with sex. It seems like it's about sex, but a lot of the men that came were either single and lonely or partnered and lonely because they weren't having the connection in the relationship that they already had. So they were seeking it somewhere else.
It's very interesting you say that, and that resonates with a lot of people I've talked to. So, two groups, I guess: people that create OnlyFans content and have a direct dynamic with their not clients, with the people that subscribe to them, and especially I find it when I talk to people that are dominatrix. And they often say that a lot of time people think, oh, it's all about sort of sex and about spanking and about, and they said to be fair, 90% of it is actually us as dominatrix creating a safe space where a
Hmm.
man typically can come and talk and can say things that perhaps he's terrified to say to his partner. His fears his partner might run away screaming or think he's a pervert or whatever. And I think, and again, I think that's part of the patriarchal society that traditionally, as men, we're not meant to submit or be the submissive. We've always been
Yes.
taught that we should be the dominant, and that's not how it works. And a lot of dominatrix who are all the ones I talk to are absolutely wonderful, incredibly intelligent, nurturing people. A lot of what they say is what you say. People want to come and actually connect.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, some of the men that I would talk to would literally cry in the strip club because they were talking about like their mother that died or their wife that died or their marital problems. And so, like, yes, it wasn't acceptable in their mind to go to see a therapist, but they kind of were seeing a therapist because I was a therapist. And they would, my clients would come back time and time again to see me because, yes, they got that connection and I was a real person. I wasn't just pretending,
Yeah.
to be somebody that I wasn't. So I think that was during that period of time when I was dancing and working as a stripper and going to school for life coaching that I did the dancing as I needed to pay for the life coaching, and then I realized, all of this is really what I've always been interested in is sexuality and relationships and connection. So that's going to be my focus. And also at that time, I still have this friend, but I had met a woman who excuse me, who does channeling. And so she started channeling for me and telling me that actually I had been a priestess many times in past lives and that was my sacred work. And so I've kind of known that since then, which was like, 25 years ago when I did the dancing. And so, more recently, in the past couple of years, as I've gotten close, now I'm 60, but when I was 58, I said, you've been doing this stuff, Maria. You're a therapist, you're a coach, you give workshops about sacred sexuality, about Tantra. That's the priestess stuff, but you know that that's real sacred work. So, are you going to do it or aren't you? You know what I mean? Because it's getting to be that point in life, right? I'm not going to be young enough to still function well and work forever. And so I decided that yes, I was going to do it. And so I ended up creating a course for women who are in their 40s and up who start to have these um, perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal symptoms. And um, quite by mistake. So I met a man who began doing so there's two kinds of tantric massage. There's in the female body, it's called Yoni massage. Yoni means like a woman's vulva, vagina, and womb. Lingam means wand of light in Sanskrit. So basically penis, but so this man started doing self lingam massage. People say, well, what's the difference between that and masturbation, right? And the difference is that actually lingam massage involves a lot more than masturbating. It's not masturbating. And the key component to it is actually the massaging of the prostate. And the prostate in a man is the place where most of the stuck energy, when we were talking earlier about trauma, so any unprocessed feelings or thoughts from things that have happened to someone in the past in a male body is held in the prostate. And so there's a real connection, even though it's a spiritual healing practice. What it does, in the same for the Yoni massage for a woman, and the sacred spot for a woman is actually the G spot. What it does is the more that that stuck energy gets released through repeated massaging, the more that there's nothing left between the person's body and their pleasure. So this man that I met said, I've been doing this self lingam massage practice every day for a couple of years now, and I started having these incredible experiences where I'm having full body orgasms, one after another, and I want to get the word out. And I said, well, let's do a workshop together. So we taught this group of men how to do self lingam massage, including the prostate massage. And then I started writing, because I write usually a blog once a week. So I put out my newsletter and I say, hey, ladies, you should be doing self yoni massage. I wasn't even doing self yoni massage, but I was recommending it to others. And then I thought, okay, it's time to, stop being hypocritical. This is the part where the accidental learning took place. I started giving myself a yoni massage every morning. And I had, in my menopausal journey, come all the way through, but I still had some symptoms left over from menopause, which apparently maybe never would go away. I was having vaginal dryness. I was less interested in sex, and I've always been very interested in sex most of my life, as you know. And my orgasms were sometimes either not happening or not so, like more like a blip than like a really enjoyable event like they used to be. And so through the course of doing this self yoni massage now for about a year and a half, but after just a few weeks, the vaginal dryness was gone. I went to the OBGYN. She said, wow, you're just so naturally lubricated for a woman your age. It's because of the self yoni massage. And then my orgasm started coming back better than ever. I am now at this point at 60 having the best sex of my life. And I know that the only variable that changed is I started doing the self yoni massage. So, what I found out in my research is that women's hormones, so the testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen, that all decrease during menopause, are balanced by self yoni massage. So that's why I made this self-study course for women, because, again, this is what we've been talking about, right? The patriarchy. Why do women not know this about their own bodies?
Yeah. It's thank you so much for sharing that. 'Cause it's, I mean, I'm at that time in my life. My wife's in that time of her life. So
Mhm.
for me, I mean, what am I now? Sort of late 50s. My erections aren't the same as they were when I was 20, for goodness sake, and they're
Right.
not like that at
Exactly.
all. And they're not, I'm not sort of hammering nails in with it or anything. It doesn't
Right.
last as long and stuff. And then and my wife's sort of perimenopause, menopause, and it's and I do think the medical profession, and I totally understand general practitioners, family doctors, there's such a limited amount of time. My wife went to the doctor, said, well, here's some HRT, you can either take this or
Yeah.
don't take it. That was pretty
Yeah.
much it. There was
Right.
nothing. There was nothing about anything else. There was no advice, no guidance. So for many women, I think certainly maybe a few years ago, many women and many men at this stage of our lives will think, well, that's okay. I had a good run. We had sex. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty much it now. And
Exactly.
but we're living now for another, hopefully you and I are going to live for another 20, 25, 30, 35 years, for goodness sake. Do we really want to have no physical pleasure intimacy for all that time? So
Well, that's it, right?
so it's when people discover you and they perhaps come on one of your retreats, or they come to learn
Mhm.
from you, or I mean, there's some people sort of dive straight in and they're, wow, let's go. Other people must be, oh my goodness, should I come to this? I'm not sure I should have turned out. Or how do you find people are? What's the difference between people when you first meet them, and then people at the end when they've experienced the massage?
So I would say that most people start out being really nervous,
Yeah.
right? So I've been giving these workshops on how to do partnered yoni massage or partnered lingam massage for decades. Like since my dancing days, I started giving those workshops because it's something that I already knew how to do, like when I was born here, right? I never went to school for that. So people are nervous. They also have a misconception that learning lingam massage or yoni massage, it's going to be this like really hot technique that they're going to do with their partner. It's going to spice up their sex life. Well, doing the actual technique itself is not necessarily so hot. I mean, it's like helping your
Yeah.
partner release trauma in their body. It
Mhm.
can be beautiful, but it's not necessarily a big turn on.
Yeah.
Afterwards, by the end, most people are very engaged. They're much more relaxed. I think one of the things that's difficult for people in general, I mean, you and I are talking about it. You're obviously not in this category, but most people don't even want to talk about anything to do with sex. In fact, a lot of my clients that come to me for therapy, including couples and individuals, they they might have another therapist, but their therapist isn't even comfortable talking about sex, or they're not very knowledgeable about it, so
Yeah.
they seek me out, right? So people like, sometimes I do these connection calls with people that are thinking about working with me,
Mhm.
and so we see if we're a good fit to work together. The majority of the people are very nervous to even talk about like that they might be having some kind of sexual problem. They don't know, is it okay to say certain words? Am I going to be offended? Am I going to be angry? And I say it's very hard to offend me. There's almost nothing you
Try,
can
really
say.
try. Come on.
Yeah, right. Do your best. But we're so socialized to be afraid of these topics. Most couples don't talk about sex. And then maybe they wonder, why aren't we having sex anymore? Why isn't the sex very good? It's because you don't talk about it, right? So one time I put a post up on Instagram and it just said, sex, 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 sex. I said, well, I'm just trying to get you all used to hearing it more, because it's part of our lives as human beings. None of us would be here if it weren't for sex, right? Except for, I suppose, test tube babies. But the majority of us are here on the planet because sexual energy exists and because sexuality and sexual expression exists. And yet, it's such a taboo subject. So, I feel like part of my purpose is just to help, just keep talking about it to help people get more comfortable.
Yeah, and it's an important thing to do. I think two things we don't talk about often within relationships are sex and money, and both of which are important for very different reasons. But I totally hear what you're saying, because you meet somebody, you make out with them, you start dating, you perhaps in a relationship, you get married, or you're long term relationship. You might be with somebody 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, and after a while,
Yes,
you turn and look and think, gosh, we've done the same thing for the last
exactly.
15 years, and it was okay, but maybe there's
Yeah.
something else I want to try, or maybe there's something else. Maybe I don't like it when you bite me earlobe anymore. Maybe I don't like it when you tickle my feet. Maybe I used to like that 20 years ago. But
Yes.
I think we're often very hesitant to say anything we think might cause offense or might upset somebody, or we don't want to hear our partner of 20 years saying to us, "Oh, you pervert! Why do you want to do that?" The partner probably wouldn't say that at all. So
Mhm.
how do you help people almost create their own safe space for that conversation? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. So I encourage the couples I work with, first of all, I teach them a specific communication technique called the 5-step communication process
Okay.
that has to do with really hearing each other and making clear, like, part of the process is to literally say, what I heard you say was blank. And then the partner gets to say, yeah, that was it. Or, well, that was sort of it, but then you missed this part. So, like, because what's really true is that when I say a sentence, first of all, the English language, probably every language, can be very ambiguous. So when I say something, it might not be the same thing that you think that I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? But also, when I say something, perhaps the other person has what is called a listening filter. Perhaps the other person had a parent that was critical, for example. And so when they hear something coming from another person, they interpret that sentence as oh, that was a criticism of me, whereas sometimes that's not what it was at all. And so it's really important, because anyone's unhealed trauma is the really basically the number one thing that stops us from having the kind of open, honest, harmonious relationships that we want to have, because we're sort of like internally, a lot of life starts to feel like reenacting the trauma from the past if we haven't healed that
Yeah.
stuff. So I do recommend that my couples use that communication technique, but also that they establish a regular weekly time to actually sit down and talk about, how is this relationship going? How has this relationship been for you this week? This is how it's been for me. Because if we don't do that, things kind of go by and happen. We don't bring them up, and then we all know, right? If I'm upset about something and I don't bring it up, it's going to come up later in some form.
Yeah.
These things don't just go away. And then that creates layers of, distrust and resentment and etc. So I really feel like, in general, the solution to these uncomfortable conversations is make it a regular practice. And it doesn't have to be all negative. It could be, well, I really liked when we went on this date and we did this thing that was really refreshing for me and I felt closer to you afterwards. It can be, what went well this week in our relationship and what didn't go so well that I now want to bring up, rather than starting something up in the moment. Like, so here's a typical pattern in my marriage, is that towards the end of the day, I get tired and I'm not in the best mood often before bed. So if my husband happens to say or do something that bothers me, it might seem like this huge deal to me at night. And then most of the time I say, okay, I'm just going to sleep on this and see how I feel in the morning. And I wake up and I go, oh my gosh, that was nothing. But that was the state that I was in, that I interpreted it a certain way. Right. So that's why it's kind of nice to have a time to talk about things, unless something is really, really urgently needing to be talked about. Most of the time, by the time we get around to it's time for our, we call it a relationship party in our marriage, not a meeting. Um, Most things don't seem so important anymore. Those petty things that we get in arguments about, they're not so important most of the time.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm very much like you, so I get the same just before bed, and I tend to find that, yeah, the smallest thing just before we go to bed, I'm like, oh, for goodness sake. And then that puts me in a bad mood, and I'll sleep my back to my wife and just think, for goodness sake. And
Yeah.
I think about it in the morning. It's like, did it really matter that she didn't put the cup in the dishwasher, or did it really matter that I fed the cat? It's so ridiculous. But at the time, when I'm tired and it's not been the best day, and I'm a bit frustrated, and I just want to go to bed, it's like, oh gosh, yeah, yeah, it's kind of weird. So, and and I don't mean to insult you at all. So gosh,
Yeah.
I start having one. So one of the challenges I've always had with therapy, and I've been to see therapists, is that the therapists I've always been to see, they've always, I felt, tried to fix me from the neck up,
Uh-huh.
and most of my, and I tend to very much hold my emotions, my negative energy, or whatever, in my gut. I can describe the shape
Mm,
of it. I can feel the shape, and sense it, whatever. So
yeah.
I always do, talk to therapists, go to them and talk, get to hear, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
but I'm not releasing something, and I wonder, how do you? Because I know a lot of work you do now is what I'm very passionate about, is this more the sort of somatic work. How
Yes.
do you almost help people progress from perhaps what they might consider to be more traditional therapy, where, so come and tell me about your childhood, come to talk to me about that, to actually releasing and letting that feeling in my gut go away, and I can lose this massive amorphous anger that I've got in there. Gosh,
Yes.
sorry, I'll think of somebody
No.
else, but
Perfectly okay. I think that you're really onto something there, which is that talking about stuff is not really what creates lasting change for a person, right? Like, for my own experience, I went to therapists on and off for years until I met a woman that developed a technique that is called gentle reprocessing.
Mhm.
And gentle reprocessing is not talking about all the bad things that have happened to you in your life, it's actually letting go of the stuck energy. So, just like the sacred spot massage does create lasting change for people because they're releasing that stuck energy, the gentle reprocessing is kind of like the clinical way to do that, or the psychological way to do that. And so what I realized is that something that doesn't change a person at the cellular level does not create lasting change for them, because it's not about, oh yeah, I know I should do the right thing next
Yeah.
time, I'll try to do the right thing next time, but then no, nothing changes, right? It's about, so with the gentle reprocessing, it's what they call a bilateral brain stimulation treatment.
Mhm.
And so you may or may not have heard of EMDR,
Yeah.
eye movement. Okay, so many people know what that is now. It's been around for a while. So this is sort of an offshoot of that.
Mhm.
And so when we are talking about getting stimulation on one side of the brain and then the other, there's something about that. Nobody really understands exactly how it works. And we would pick a topic for something, say that somebody fell down the stairs when they were a kid and that was very traumatic for them. We would have a topic, and then the person goes into sort of like a semi trance kind of state through, I would lead them into a guided visualization. And in this visualization, then they can be in a safe place and they can see what's the next feeling or thought that comes up for them. And then there's a method to release whatever that is. And somehow the brain, literally with the bilateral stimulation, rewires itself so that when whatever that traumatic event gets triggered by something that reminds them of it, then they don't have those same physiological reactions, because the traumatic memory is now filed away in the place that the normal memories are.
Mhm.
And they're not um, getting those same physiological responses in their bodies and those same emotional responses that come up. And so, if you had a bunch of clothes in a closet on hangers and you were reaching into the closet of your normal memories, so every piece of clothing is a normal memory, you can pull one out and look at it and then put it back in the closet and nothing bad has happened, right? Like, we can remember our normal memories and there's no consequences, there's no negative consequences. Well, with gentle reprocessing, the result is that after you've done a session on a particular trauma, that trauma doesn't affect you anymore. And it's really important to do this work, whether someone does it through the therapy, right? The therapeutic way of doing it with a technique like gentle reprocessing or EMDR, because this is where people get themselves into trouble. If they don't release that stuck energy, they just keep repeating the same patterns over and over. So I'll give you a really concrete example in my own life. When I was still pretty young, probably like 11 or 12 years old, my older brother started having problems with drugs and alcohol. I grew up, I became an adult. There was a point where I could not seem to date somebody that didn't have some kind of addiction, even though I was screening them for that. And I thought, like, oh, okay, for sure, I've really checked this guy out. No, because he would always pop up with some kind of, whether it was drugs, alcohol, pornography, they all had some kind of addiction going on. And so I thought, okay, this is not that, it's never that the person is bad at picking a partner. It's never that. What we are really perfect at is picking a partner that's going to trigger our unhealed traumas so that they can be healed. So no matter how many partners I got that had problems with drugs and alcohol and then broke up with them, and then get another one that had the same problem and then broke up with them, I was just going to keep doing the same thing. So I went to this therapist, who actually is the one that created gentle reprocessing, and I did some trauma work around this stuff that had happened with my brother. Never dated another man that had a problem with drugs or alcohol or any kind of addiction. So that's the power of releasing the trauma from the past. Like, we all will continue to pick the people, friends, partners, etc., in our lives that are going to keep repeating these same patterns. It's like we're drawn to them and we don't even know why, but there's something familiar about them, right? You know,
Yeah.
that feeling when you meet somebody, you almost feel like, oh, it seems like I've known you more than just these past 10 minutes. That's because they're familiar, because their traumas and your traumas are sometimes the same, or they're the ones that are going to reinflict those traumas on you that you've had in the past. And so, I say that the purpose of relationship is actually so we can trigger each other, so we can figure out what still needs to be healed, so we can heal it, so then we can just be happier together.
That's a fabulous example. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody listening, I'm sure, has got a friend or themselves that always seems to date the same guy, girl, that's the same. If you
Yeah.
your last boyfriend was like that, your last girlfriend, yeah, no, this time it'll be different. But let's say, but then it's, yeah, but then so often the friend advising by the way, well, just leave them or you change them. Or it's not about necessarily changing the other person. It's about, like you say, it's recognizing it within yourself and
Exactly.
creating it. So actually it becomes a non-event in a way. You've gone past that. That doesn't have a hold on you anymore. And I really like that. One of the things I was reading about on your website, which is a fabulous website, by the way. I'll put
Thank
the
you.
links into the notes, people can find you. But you
Awesome.
sort of, in the program, The Lost Art, I guess
Yes.
the name sort of suggests that there are skills or ways of being in intimacy that we've perhaps forgotten. And I think one of the things that I think has happened in the last, I don't know, this century, last 20 years or whatever, I think we almost ironically, we've got this amazing technology that
Mhm.
allows me in the UK, you in America, to talk to each other. We can see each other. I can hear you very clearly. It's wonderful. So we have this
Yeah.
amazing technology that, on a very superficial way, connects us, but at the same time, I feel
Hmm.
it's almost done the opposite. It's made us feel more disconnected than ever before. So
Yes.
one example I always give is that I remember watching on TV a few months ago. It was a Taylor Swift concert,
Yeah.
and it was filmed in the crowd, and 95% of the crowd were watching or experiencing this amazing concert through their phones. So they had their phone up in
Yes.
front of them. They were filming it, taking photographs, whatever, but they weren't. And they wanted to sort of scream at them. Just you're never gonna watch this, you're never gonna watch footage again. It's filmed by millions of
Yes.
people. Just
Uh-huh.
be there and feel it. But they were limiting themselves to this sort of little screen. And I feel that's almost what we do in life now. We
Mm.
have this barrier to true connection. I'm not even sure what the question is, but it almost feels that the lost art is the ability to truly connect with somebody. Is that something you
It
feel?
is. I would say that, for me, the reason why, and that's my self study course that I mentioned earlier, the Lost Art.
Mhm.
The reason why I call it that is actually because Tantra, which is what the sacred spot massage is from, right, is the lost art, right? So Tantra is something that was created thousands of years ago. In certain parts of the world, it was practiced. In Thailand, for example, people go regularly to get their lingam massage or their yoni massage, and everybody accepts that that is a normal part of like having a human body and staying healthy. And most people, say in America or in the UK, they don't even know what sacred spot massage is,
Yeah.
let alone what it can do for them. So I feel like Tantra, which is very much about connection, right? So Tantra means that's the thing that's been lost. But Tantra is the word Tantra actually means a weaving together, and it means that you might have heard this expression before, as above so below. So it's about how, say in the heavens, right, um, people tend to think, well, there's this spiritual thing up there, and then there's this world down there and here, and we're really not connected. But the fact is that every single, even this chair that you're sitting on right now, even this microphone, like everything has divine energy in it, because
Mhm.
that's all that exists in the universe. So we're all connected. Every person is connected, every object, every animal, every rock out in the woods, all of it is connected. And to help remind themselves of that, one of the things that Tantra practitioners, this is very extreme, but have been known to do, is meditate while sitting on top of a pile of garbage to accentuate the fact that everything is actually sacred.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I love to introduce couples and individuals to Tantra is because it gets us out of our head, which is where a lot of people spend their time when they're trying to connect with their partner, even if it's a sexual experience, and into our body. Right. So there's a very simple tantric technique which is called eye gazing, where you simply sit across from your partner and gaze into the left eye of your partner, the left eye because it's the closest to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And while doing this, you synchronize your breathing. So if you did this for even 2 minutes before having an important conversation with your partner, before lovemaking, it creates a real sense of connection with the other person. And then you also are creating presence, right? So when you're doing this breathing and eye gazing, you are just so completely present there with your partner. Presence is the thing that also helps with all the different kinds of sexual dysfunction that people have, right? So I get a lot of men that come to me and say, "Oh, I can't get an erection, I can't maintain an erection." Well, why is that? That's almost never because there's some kind of a physical problem.
Yeah.
There is sometimes. That's easy to correct. It's the psychological piece that's hard,
Mm.
because what happens is, maybe one time, excuse me, you go to make love with your partner, and for whatever reason, your penis doesn't work that day. And then the next time you go to make love with your partner, you think, oh boy, I hope I don't have that
Yeah.
problem, right? And then in the back of your mind, you're actually recreating that problem. So
Yeah.
that's what happens with the men who end up having chronic erectile dysfunction. It's almost always that there's this thing in their head going, I hope this doesn't happen. And then it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. So, Tantra, it kind of like cuts out all that mind chatter
Mm-hmm.
and helps the person stay present in the moment and stay focused on their partner, on their own body sensations. And when that happens, suddenly there's no problem. That's kind of one of the examples of why I love Tantra and why I think it is such a thing that's really people are undereducated about, and also it's underutilized because Tantra literally can solve every single problem that a person has in terms of their sexual function.
It's funny, isn't it, how things that were so powerful from so many centuries ago just get pushed to one side. And I don't know whether that's because, I don't know, maybe it's because it's just not talked about, or it's not discussed, or and it's something that it's not part of our education system. It's not part of something you talk to your partner about when you first start dating. It's yeah. And it's really, I don't know, the way you describe it and the way you communicate it makes it very real and sort of takes it slightly away from the esoteric. Oh my gosh, this is a bit weird. This is a bit, I'm not sure about this.
Right.
It makes it something actually very practical, because 100%, as you say, if I went to have intercourse yesterday and couldn't get an erection, then of course tomorrow I'm going to be thinking, oh, is that going to happen again? And then it does happen again. And then of course the next time, and then before I know it, it's, oh, there's no point trying that. No point trying that. It's just it. And that's terrible. It's,
Yeah.
so a lot of people that, and I work with people from lots of different relationship structures. So they might be polyamorous, or they might be monogamous. They might have what they've defined as a kink relationship. Do you think there is one state more natural than the other? Do you think we are designed to be monogamous?
It's a great topic. So what I've learned is, this is my belief, is that naturally there are some people who are monogamous, and the majority of people are naturally not designed to be monogamous. However, in most of our societies, it's considered wrong and bad and immoral to be polyamorous. And so many people just try to repress their desires to have more than one partner. And it becomes quite complicated because for those that do decide to have more than one partner, things come up, right? Like jealousy comes up,
Yeah.
things that are emotionally hard to deal with come up, and we've not been taught how to deal with that stuff at all. It's entirely possible to do it, and I certainly know polyamorous people, and I've been a polyamorous person who has loved being in that lifestyle because really it's a very what's the word, it's the opposite of scarcity. It's a very abundant point of view that we all have a lot of love, and we have the ability to have attraction for and love for more than one person, and it's entirely possible for some of us to have that in our lives. It takes more work, it takes more time. There's a joke in polyamory that people think like polyamorous people just go around having sex all the time, but what they really do is go around having a lot of conversations with their different partners because it takes so much communication. uh, it's not an easy path, but for some people, it is their right path. And, it's not also a thing that most people talk about openly if they are in some kind of,
Yeah.
either polysexual or polyamorous relationship. Most people don't talk about it, right? They don't talk about it at work. They don't necessarily share it with family members. They don't share it with all of their friends
Mm.
because it's very much judged. People have lost their children because of being polyamorous. People have gotten fired from jobs because of it. But I do believe that for most of us, it is natural. And I have found it to be a very, very fulfilling, enjoyable way to live. Currently, that is not the choice that my husband and I are making. But I feel like little by little, more people are knowing about it and trying it out. And who knows what will happen in the
Mm.
future.
Yeah, I have a very, very similar view. It's interesting when I talk to people in the polyamorous community. So the one thing that people often don't think about is it's logistics. It sounds so boring because the rest of
Yes,
us who are not doing it think, oh my gosh, you just hopping from one house to the next, and one partner's in the next doing this, whatever. And they said that, and they said there's so many flavors of polyamory. So within
absolutely.
monogamy, it's one partner, one partner. That's it. Whereas polyamory might be I have more than one partner, or you have more than one partner, we both have more than one partner, we share partners, we don't share partners. It said, and the
Yes.
logistics, where do we spend Thanksgiving? Where do we do for Christmas? Oh my God, they said, yeah, it's finances, how do you manage things? It said it's not something to be entered into lightly. It's not just it's
Not at
not
all.
like having an affair. It's something completely removed from that. It's,
Yes.
yeah,
It's really the opposite of having an affair, because having an affair, which obviously that is a choice that some people make, right? Many people make. And I made it when I was married the first time. Having an affair is all about dishonesty and hiding.
yes,
And being polyamorous is all about honesty and being transparent.
yeah. One of the things you talked about a lot and discussed a lot in the podcast is about the value and importance of sensuality, sexuality, intimacy as we get older. So how intentional have you been about being visibly sensual in your life? A lot of things I see you put out there, a lot of them they're quite personal and intimate to you. Do you feel a sort of not responsibility because it's not your responsibility, but do you feel a need to almost do as I say and sort of act as you do, sort of thing?
I think that's very natural to me that I've learned over the
Mhm.
years. So, in my relationship, physical touch is extremely important. And for those that enjoy physical touch, some people actually don't.
Yeah,
And then that presents, somewhat of a dilemma for the other partner who probably does.
yeah,
But for, couples that stop having sex altogether, which we all know can be very common, they tend to also not touch each other much. And when we don't touch each other, we're not having the oxytocin released in our bodies. Now, many people have heard of oxytocin. It's sometimes called the bonding hormone. So one of the reasons why when we do make love with our partner, we feel so good afterwards and so connected to them is because we've just gotten a big dose of oxytocin from all that physical touch. But touch does not just need to happen when we're making love. It's important to have touch every day with our partners. While, some people do it in bed while they're sleeping, I think that's wonderful if they can do that and still sleep well at night. But many couples, if you think about going through your day, do you touch in the morning? Do you have a hug? Do you have a kiss? Do you, caress your partner while you're sitting at breakfast? Do you sit next to each other when you're watching something like a movie at home? Or are you on opposite ends of the couch with no touch? Because if you aren't having a lot of touch every day in your relationship, probably not even going to feel like having sex because you're not feeling the effects of that oxytocin, and you're not getting that bonded feeling.
Absolutely. And I think that often manifests itself in them having a very poor sex life because what one partner, so let's say the man might instigate the sort of a sexual encounter, and the partner's thinking,
Mhm.
you haven't touched me all week. Well, literally, I'm meant to just turn it on now, am I? You've been ignoring me all
Yes.
week long, and suddenly I'm meant to yeah, great, let's go. It's not,
Yes.
like I say, yeah, there's a lot to be said for, and I think that's one of the things that you've expressed so clearly is that if we can get beyond thinking of sex as sort of
Mhm.
heteronormative penis in vagina, if we sort of
Yes.
forget about that, if we replace the word sex with pleasure, or what's going to give us pleasure? It might be,
Mhm.
like you say, looking at each other, massaging each other, with the
Yes.
clothes on, holding hands, stroking somebody's hair. All those things are incredibly pleasurable. And I think sometimes we build up this thing that, well, sex is only penis and vagina, that's it. If we
Sounds
don't have
good.
that, we've not had sex. We've not been intimate.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's, yeah, and that can really come between people if that's what one partner expects. I think that's, yeah, something you've addressed really well. Well, just I know I've taken a lot of your time, so just two more quick questions, if that's okay. One would
Sure.
be, I'm not sure I even need to ask this, but one would be, how do you nurture yourself mentally? How do you nourish your soul so you can be the person you are?
So, excuse me for one moment because I didn't realize what time it is. I need to just send a quick text. Um, I make sure that I get plenty of sleep every night. I need my sleep. I make sure that I am giving myself the nutrition I need.
Hmm.
I meditate every day. I drink lots of water. If I need to process something emotionally, I will make sure that, I do that. Like, you know, I have a therapist, I do see her regularly.
Hmm.
And yeah, those are the basic things. I cannot give to others in a way that is going to be helpful if I'm not, filling my own cup,
Yeah.
so to speak.
And finally, what do you have a vision or a desire for what the future might hold?
Mm. So, my deepest desire is that people in the world will start to become more open to, number one, the fact that sex is a good thing and it's actually holy and beautiful, and that tantra is a thing that gets recognized again more in the world, so that people can have more of that connection, first with themselves,
Mm.
then with their partners, and including the divine, right? That the beauty of the connection is because there is some kind of higher power, something bigger than ourselves out there. So that's my fondest wish.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, for being so open, and for answering every question with there's a well thought out, well reasoned, passionate response. I really appreciate our time together.
Yeah, this was lovely. And I do want to mention one other thing. I know
Mm.
you said that you already have my website
Mhm.
information up there. So my website is mariamerloni.com, and I've made a 5-minute guided video practice for women to reconnect with their yonis. And so if they go to mariamerloni.com/ritual, they can get that for free.
Perfect. I'll make sure I put the link to that on there. People can find it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.